Hi, I'm Dr. Mel Lurie. I'm a physician specializing in psychiatry, and I'm the author of PsychePolitics, How to Read the Political Mind. Well, we've already talked about how our biology is represented by our genes develop into our mind, and how the mind works, especially in psychiatry, from an unconscious perspective in politics. The next video has to do with the two essentials of life, and we're starting to put it all together. See how you like this one. We talked about how genes made the body and the body the mind. Now, there are two crucial aspects of life that have to occur for us, or our genes, to survive, for in fact the human species to survive. One is survival, and that's of course obvious. The question is, what fuels survival? What fuels the behaviors that one does or doesn't do in order to survive, and to survive long enough, to reproduce enough, so that our genes go on? Some of the things that we do are relate well to people, stay away from danger. These things give us pleasure, and pleasure reinforces these behaviors, so that that's what drives, that's the fuel for survival. At the same time, as we saw before, there can be pain, so that the avoidance of pain is tied in with the achievement of pleasure. The feeling of anxiety occurs when one fears or feels there will be pain, either a loss or even a physical injury. The reinforcement of our survival behaviors occurs because they give us pleasure and avoid pain. And this is called the pleasure principle, and it guides most of what we do, certainly in our early years. And by pleasure, what I mean is things that make us feel good, things that we want to do, feel like doing, we love to do, we enjoy, we just want to do. We don't know why, but we do them. On the other hand, if we don't have the appropriate amount of fear, we could not survive as long. That is, we need to avoid pain as well. So as the young child is born, he starts to develop, and he learns something. He learns that he has to obey another principle. This is called the reality principle. This starts as early as toddlerhood. Remember the Thanksgiving get-togethers where the whole family is there, including little toddlers. They take great joy in repeating what they've just learned to do. It gives them a sense of accomplishment, autonomy, and pleasure. The problem is, if they run too fast, they fall and hurt themselves. Or if they try to go down the stairs, they fall and hurt themselves. So they learn that early something called the reality principle, and they have to start to develop the capacity to delay gratification of their impulses to gain pleasure, in this case by running. To repeat, they have to learn to delay the gratification of pleasure from their impulse to gain it, to run. And ultimately they'll be able to get around and even run very well, just like the adults do. Now, what I'm talking about here is really standard psychological psychiatry teaching. It's the guideline for much of what we do. It was developed perhaps 150 years ago by Freud and his followers, and although other things have come along in the field, these still apply. They create a framework through which we can view modern political life. Well, Barack Obama in today's world understands the pleasure principle very well. He offers to give and help various segments of society: the teachers, the impoverished, women, those people who have felt generally outside the mainstream or haven't participated in it that much. In any case, when he does that, even though it's known to most people that he can't accomplish everything that he promises, what happens is a little something in us feels good. Feels good because he's giving something to us, and it stirs our pleasure at depending to some extent. Maybe he'll think of us. If we're a teacher, he might not be able to get us more, but maybe he'll do so if the opportunity arises. He's for us. Mitt Romney, on the other hand, talks about the reality principle. We can't do it. It costs too much. It would leave the country in ruins. There would be a big price to pay amongst our children in the next generations. And so the two sides talk past each other instead of to each other. Now, mind you, in a political contest or any contest, the point isn't to cooperate. The adversaries are not there to cooperate. One is there to win. But let's see what would happen if Mitt Romney would address both the pleasure principle and the reality principle. If he would say things, for example, like, we'd love to help the teachers get more. They bring up our youth, and they're an important part of society. He's addressing their pleasure principle. But the problem is we can't afford it. That's the reality principle. And he could do the same thing with the unions, with those getting entitlements, and those who would get extra health insurance. That is, he could talk about the pleasure of wanting to give them something and paying attention to them, at the same time making the point that there's a reality principle going on. To the extent he would do that, a little something in people would say, yes, he knows we're here. He cares about us. Sure, Sure, he might not be able to give us what we want or special treatment, but he does know, and if the opportunity arose, he'd help us out. Well, that's not how it all works in politics today, but that's something that could occur, and it's a way for various politicians to address the people. At the same time, the political mind is not just in the politicians, it's in all of us as citizens. So we have to understand how all this works, because when the politicians try to manipulate us with various tactics, we need to know what's going on. And we need to apply our own reality principle and not just go for the pleasure principle. Let's move on to the second critical aspect of life, the second essential of life, which is reproduction. Remember, without this, we and our characteristics that are inherited, that are biological and part of our genes, can't go on. You know, there's a lot of argument people have about behaviors. Some behaviors are considered to be inborn, others learned. So some come from nature, the ones that are inborn and would be passed on in reproduction, and some come from nurture and culture and won't be passed on necessarily, certainly not biologically, though they will be passed on in terms of the values of a given family. In any case, though, there is argument about what is nature and what is nurture. A good part of our behavior is, in fact, nature, and those that engage of it survive and reproduce, and those who reproduce have to survive as well, ultimately reproducing themselves, and we wind up with more genes. I hope you've enjoyed this past video and found it interesting. In the next video, which is called Reproduction, Sex and Beyond, we're going to talk about how some of the fundamentals of life are translated into each generation.